Today is the 24th of September, and in 1 month's time, on the 24th of October, the book that I have spent the best part of the last 2.5 years is going to be released. Now, I've been wanting to write a book since as long as I can remember, and it's finally happening. It hasn't been an easy journey, and I just thought I'd share a little bit about that journey with you as to how this particular book, Focus on Why, Create a Purposeful Way of Life by Amy Rowlandson with George Fleming Kerr, came about. So it was lockdown, and I had one door close on me with one business, and I wanted to do something else anyway, so it was all good. Long story short on that particular chapter. But podcast or book, which comes first? Decided that I would launch the podcast purely because I didn't feel I knew enough about the topic of purpose to actually get a book out there. So I launched the podcast Focus on Why and interviewed people from all around the world. It's still going, 425 episodes later, still absolutely thriving. Now, a couple of years into that journey, I realised that it probably was about time to write the book about purpose that I've been wanting to write for a long time. And so I started thinking, right, let's go. What can I do? I booked a creative writing session with Erin Chamberlain. And in that session, it came out that I wanted to write a book alongside or with my grandfather, because he used to tell me fabulous stories as a child. And I thought, well, I could use his voice, the relationship we had, which was a beautiful one, and it could be his wartime stories where there were hidden, embedded life lessons that I would be receiving as a child. So those sort of fireside chats that you have. And I thought, great, I set about writing that. Wasn't as easy as that. I hit a massive imposter syndrome. How could I possibly write from my grandfather's perspective? He was a brilliant TV, radio, play writer that wrote for a living. How could I match his area of expertise in this space? He was a fabulous storyteller. So again, I shelved the idea of the book, and then I thought, no, I really want to write this. And I reached out to another coach, another mindset coach. This time it was Olga Gaydana, and thank you, Olga, for this. So Olga sat me down and said, let's try something. Would you be willing to try a meditation? I said, anything, absolutely. So I close my eyes and I start to go through the meditation which Olga facilitated. Essentially, she asked me to close my eyes and imagine I was in a space, just in a room, no one else there, and to then find a chair, take a seat. And I said, well, I can't because my grandfather is already there. So now I'm not deluded. I'm very aware that I was voicing both parts of this dialogue between my grandfather and myself. But essentially, he championed me to just get on with writing the book, and reminded me that my podcasting work had been an extension of his work that he'd been doing on radio, and that this was just the next phase or generation to take over the legacy that he'd started, and I was continuing in that same way, and that I was already changing the way people thought and acted with my words, that I was already a storyteller, just in a different medium. And with that, I felt empowered to get writing. So I set about writing. However, that was March 2022. I was at a conference and I was driving back from a Professional Speaking Association conference in Wales, and I get a phone call from my mother to say that my grandmother had had a fall and that I needed to go to the hospital straight away, which I did. And unfortunately, I had to say goodbye. We'd been planning her 90th birthday just in a couple of months' time at that time, and yeah, really sad. So going through her things, I stumbled upon a box called George Precious. Now, George is the name of my grandfather. He died in 1996, and my grandmother had been keeping some of his things, of course she would do, but none of us had seen the contents of this book before, of this box, sorry, and in that box was a book. It was a scrapbook that he'd collected and collated and compiled between September 1939 and April 1945. He was a prisoner of war for 5 years. He was captured in June 1940, and when I opened this book, it opened to one page particularly, which is the 30th of September 1942, and on that line it read, "Proposal to write, way of life, the need for a planned life for every circumstance, every facet of living." And I was like, are you joking? Have a purpose, have a plan, focus on why is what I talk about all the time. I could not ignore the sign that I was meant to write this book with my grandfather, but this time I realised that he was going to be more of a part of it. I put it aside for a bit. I was raw, I wasn't expecting my grandmother to die, we were very close, and I picked that book up later in the year, not until December 2022, and I read it from cover to cover, and I realised I didn't need to worry about writing from George's perspective. He could write his own parts and we could write the book together. And so that is what I've done. Focus on Why is a collaborative book. It uses my framework on how to create a purposeful way of life. It takes the stories that I've had the privilege of recording with so many people from around the world, and it also intertwines this incredible journal that I found from my grandfather. It's a really heartfelt piece of work. It is a legacy that I'm continuing, that I'm helping to continue from his work to ensure that his memory is not forgotten. And it's an opportunity for you to really focus on what's important to you in life and really take the messages that I share in this book and apply them to your own way of life. It's not a prescribed way of life at all. It is for you to choose. So 1 month today, that book will be available for you to read, but you can already pre-order it. It's available on Amazon. So yeah, there are some other elements to the story that really do prove that the universe conspires to make things happen, particularly this book, and I'm not going to share them all here. You'll have to read the book to find out. So yes, thank you for buying the book and for taking a leap if you don't know me and trusting that it may be of value in some way. So here's to focus on why and for you to create your purposeful way of life.